sweet and of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, and above the pilgrims ride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Wow.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're going to need to sit down for this. When Justin Deputy asked me to do this, I thought he asked me to do a perspirational moment. And then later in the week, Linda emailed me and said it was an inspirational moment. So I'll try to do both here today. Mark Hatfield, the late Mark Hatfield, he was a senator from Oregon for 30 years. Finished serving in 1997. But before he left, he said the following: "We stand by as children starved by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we've had the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth." Now, in the year 2000, the world came together at the United Nations in over 190 countries, agreed on certain goals by the year 2015. These were called the Millennium Development Goals. And there were 8 of them. And there's been remarkable progress. Some of the goals were met, many of them were not met. But I thought you might be interested in some of these. So goal number 1 was to cut extreme poverty in half. And 1990, poverty meaning living on less than $1.25 a day. In 1990, 47% of humanity was living in that situation. And this year, it's down to 14%. Quite remarkable. We haven't done as well on education. The goal was to reach universal, all kids in primary school. And we haven't really gotten very close to that, and many of the schools are not very good. And I'll talk more about goal number 4, reducing the mortality rate for children under the age of 5. And some of the other ones, number 6, that's pretty impressive. 7.6 million lives have been saved from treating HIV. 6.2 million saved by our efforts, and 37 million saved from TB, deaths from TB. Number 8, you might be internet. 6% of the world that was connected. Now it's up to 43%. And mobile phones went from 700,000 mobile phones in the world to now 7 billion mobile phones. Now, one of the goals that H1 also involved more connected in this effort. And so one of the things that we look at is official development aid, ODA, official development aid. So this is like foreign aid. And if you look at the top graph, and I acknowledge this may be hard to see, but when you look at absolute dollars, the U.S. gives the most by far, followed by the UK, Japan, Germany, France. Now, before you break your arm, patting ourselves on the back here, look at the bottom graph. Now, the bottom graph is showing official development aid as a percentage of gross national income. So as a proportion of your economy. And the world is kind of, over the last 30 or 40 years, has come up with a goal, what wealthy countries should be doing. And that is 0.7%, so less than 1%, 0.7% of gross national income. And if you look there, there's only 5 countries that are doing that. Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, Denmark, and the UK. Okay, where's the US? Can you find the US in there? We're way down at less than 0.2%. Okay, here's the inspiration part here. So when I first got interested in the issue of preventable child deaths under the age of 5, preventable, meaning these kids were dying from lack of an immunization or lack of a 10-cent packet of oral rehydration salts, just simple stuff. There were 40,000 children dying daily. And this is a graph from UNICEF, and it starts in 1990, but that number is now down to 16,000 a day. So huge progress. In fact, public health experts now are talking about making this number 0 by the year 2035. So, I mean, I never thought I'd hear that. Now, if you look at this graph, the red line is if we're do business as usual. Now, we can bend that curve if we put more attention on this. Now, before I read this quotation, let me say a few things. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, excuse the French. This quotation, he died in 1944. He was a French aristocrat and author, poet. You might remember him. He was the author of Little Prince. Anyway, he died during World War II in 1944 doing reconnaissance for the French. Also, if you're a woman, then don't think of yourself excused from this, because we believe that this was the last century. And if you're a man considering becoming a woman, then you're not excused either, because so the quotation here is, to become a man is to be responsible, to be ashamed of the miseries that you did not cause. So this is the perspiration part. If you can identify with this, if you feel responsible and ashamed, I hope you'll take action. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Scott. That was really interesting, educational. You never know what you're going to get when Dr. Luckman comes up to the podium. Now I'd like to introduce the head table. We have, of course, Dr. Scott Luckman, Shahab Saeed, who is President-elect. Is that what you refer to as? President-elect. And then we have Nancy Brown, and Dr. Schiffman, and Dr. Schiffman's son, Ed Schiffman. Hello, Ben. Welcome. And I'd like to welcome some visiting Rotarians, and if you would please stand and remain standing. We have James Pierce from the Club of Honolulu, District 5000. Welcome. And we have Carmela Ramaglia from District 5030, the Bellevue Breakfast Club. So welcome very much. And then we have a few guests. Graham Duxey and Bentley Williams are guests of Mary Ann Wanders. If you could please stand. Elizabeth Ruzich is a guest of John Burbidge. Lucas Goodrich is a guest of Bride Davis. Thomas and Margaret Bath are guests of Thomas Bath, and those are his parents. So welcome. Deb Sawyer is a guest of Celine Browning, and Nathan Sutherland is a guest of Celine Browning. So welcome to all our guests. Just a couple of small announcements. Pam March is going to come up and talk a little bit about the September 1st Dine Around.
First of all, I have to tell you, I love Scott Lakeman. I do. I want to give Scott a big hand. He is, as you know, a very brilliant man, and he's awfully funny, but he also puts his money where his mouth is, and his efforts and his energy toward these things that he values so much. So thank you for your support, Scott. You are a hero to me. The Dine Around is a lot of fun, and I'm going to talk to you about it until you all sign up. If you're not on my piece of paper, then I will be here haunting you week after week until you say yes to something absolutely fun. This is someplace that you bring your wife to. It's a $30 deal. If you're a Rotarian, your dinner is paid for. If you bring a guest, it's $30. But it's an opportunity to sit down with a Rotarian and know them a little better, talk to them across the table, and find out what they're about. It's great fun. You need to call me. You need to invite your husband, wife, best friend, and neighbor. It's the 1st of September. It starts at 6:30. Get on my list.
And Pam, just to clarify, we don't have a lunch meeting that day. So no lunch meeting September 1st. Instead, we're doing the Dine Around that night. The next announcement is going to be from me, and it's about the fundraiser with Utah Symphony Utah Opera at Red Butte Garden, and it is the first time, it is the inaugural event of Utah Symphony Utah Opera playing at Red Butte, and it is the full symphony. So it is going to be absolutely magnificent. And the guest artists are timed for 3, and it is 2 fellows on violin and a cello. And they are absolutely wonderful. It is going to be a great night, and it's on August 13th. Performs. The Salt Lake Rotary Foundation now has the ability to take credit cards. So all you need to do is fill out the form to either myself or Leslie Peterson with Utah Symphony Utah Opera, or even with Linda if it's next week. We've currently sold tickets to sell 70, so you can do the math. That is about 40 that we need to sell. And it's $150. It includes a lovely dinner, beverages, rosemary lemonade, beer, wine. It's going to be great. The best part is you get to park in VIP parking, and you get to use the VIP entrance. Those are 2 really big selling points that are very close right to the entrance. And now we're going to have Shahab Saeed come up. He's going to do a pinning, and then he's also going to talk a little bit about acts of kindness. Shahab.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I'm going to invite John Burbridge and Elizabeth to come up while I read this announcement. So we can do the pinning ceremony. Elizabeth, if I surprise you, I'm sorry, but I think you're the best person to pin John. So come on up. I've been asking, Linda, by the way, sends her love. She had a flooding event at her house that she's waiting for repairmen to arrive. So thank you to Francie for jumping in and helping out with the registration day, and Henry. So thank you to both of you for jumping in and helping out. The announcement for the Acts of Kindness Committee is the Acts of Kindness Committee needs volunteers to help move a donated washer and dryer to an underserved family in our community. Please see Francie if you can help with the truck, and men or women to do some lifting. Anything you want to add, Francie? Can you raise your hand so they know where you are? Francie sitting at the second table. If you have access to a truck, this is a family who needs help, and somebody's been kind enough to donate that washer and dryer. So thank you very much. With that, thank you for coming out. I am delighted to be pinning John Burbridge today. John, I met John and Elizabeth through my faith community, our faith community, Baha'i Faith in Salt Lake City, and I asked John if he would come to Rotary, and this was only 2 weeks ago, right? Or maybe three weeks ago. So I think this is one of the fastest, and thanks to Steele Larson and the membership committee to expedite the process. Anyway, the reason I'm delighted that John is joining our Rotary Club is because of his brilliant mind, his giant heart, and a commitment to truth-telling that Dr. Quinn McKay would be absolutely proud of for those of you who have heard his definition of truth. John was born and raised in South Carolina, so he's got that wonderful accent, a lot better than mine. After high school, he earned a degree in robotics and then went on to get his engineering degree. And then something terrible happened and he went into law school. And, but for his good fortune is he met his beautiful wife Elizabeth at Pierce Law in New Hampshire. And then after graduating from law school, he moved to California, got tired of the traffic and the high price of housing, which we're very grateful to Californians for because they moved to Utah in 2009. He has his own law practice that's flourishing. I can tell you personally that they have a beautiful daughter that's got the most gorgeous eyes ever. And they enjoy taking care of her and tending their garden. So I'm going to give the pin to Elizabeth so you can pin John. And then John will give you a couple of minutes to say a few words. Very good. Very good, yes. Please join me in welcoming John Burbridge.
Thank you. I'll be very, very brief, but Shahab asked me to come visit Rotary and to consider joining us. I was very happy. It was something that I thought about doing even as young kids, because in Colorado, I grew up in South Carolina. All of the men that I knew respected were members of Rotary. So it's a pleasure to be able to be here with you in the field this morning today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the club. This. See.
And now I am going to have Nancy Brown come up and introduce Dr. Schiffman, and I'm going to find his PowerPoint for you. Okay. Come on.
Good afternoon. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Joshua Schiffman to you today. Primary Children's Hospital is so grateful to have Dr. Schiffman in our cancer unit because he is an innovator. He is dedicated to understanding why children develop cancer. He focuses his research on cancer susceptibility in families. He runs a translational genomics research laboratory where he combines both epidemiological and comparative oncology perspectives. He has a unique partnership with the elephants at Hogle Zoo. And it's an amazing example of how his innovation is leading to increased cure rates for children with cancer. I couldn't list all of his accomplishments here because I want to make time for him to speak to you, but I will tell you that he earned his medical degree from Brown University and completed his residencies at Stanford University, where he also directed a pediatric cancer genetics clinic. Since 2008, he's been in Utah. He's the medical director of the High-Risk Pediatric Cancer Clinic, which is a partnership with Primary Children's Hospital and Huntsman Cancer Institute. He's also an associate professor of pediatrics and the education director for the program of personalized healthcare at the University of Utah. As you are about to see, there is no one more passionate and excited about pediatric cancer research than Dr. Schiffman. I know that you will be impressed as he tells you what he has learned about why elephants don't get cancer and what that means for the hundreds of children who are diagnosed with cancer every year. Dr. Schiffman.
Thank you, Nancy, for that lovely introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here today. And thank you for having with me. I find when you give us a talk, it's supposed to happen here all the time. So I'm engaged in doing it. So if he's paying attention and not playing on the iPad, I know I'm doing it. Well, I was so glad to hear this inspirational/perspirational discussion right before we began. And what I'm going to try to convince you over the next 20 minutes or so, cancer actually falls into the disease of preventable childhood death. And I'll tell you how we're doing it and how all of you can be involved and learn about what we're doing as well. We'll start out with a big discussion, a big background about childhood cancer. We'll talk slightly about how to manage cancer risk. And then, of course, the reason you're all here, we'll talk about the elephants. And what the heck do elephants have to do with childhood cancer? I want to start, though, with something hopefully familiar to each and every one of you in the room, and that's what we've learned about polio and what the Rotary Club across the country have helped us learn about polio. This was a devastating epidemic 50, 60 years ago. Communities were completely wiped out. In the summer, pools were closed, parents were living. But through great science, public health, and community support, a lot of that support actually from Rotary Clubs, we were able to move forward and really eliminate this disease, not just locally, but across the globe. Now, why am I talking about polio and I'm talking about cancer, elephants involved? Well, that's because I think there are lessons here that we can learn, and as you'll see, can apply to cancer. And that's what happens when a community comes together and makes an effort at prevention. Now, you heard I'm a pediatric oncologist. I take care of kids with cancer, but I'm trained first and foremost as a pediatrician. And as a pediatrician, we'd rather prevent disease than treat disease. So that's what we're going to discuss today. There is an awful lot of childhood cancer that's happening. 16,000 children or more, less than the age of 20, will be diagnosed with cancer each year in North America. When you do the math, that's a 1 in 300 chance of developing cancer. And that means, though, we're doing a good job. Okay, so about 5 children with cancer, unfortunately, succumb to their disease. But 4 out of 5 make it. One of the things that I always tell parents in the middle of the night, the new diagnosis, is pediatric cancer is different than adult cancer. Right? We have survival of 80%. So that's pretty good. Now, one of my colleagues, the department chair of pediatrics, Dr. Edward Clark, he always likes to tell me when he was a boy, back treating pediatric cancer patients 50 plus years ago, It was a fatal diagnosis. On rounds, they would walk quietly by the child with leukemia because there was nothing they could do for it. But now that's changed. 80% plus cure rate. But now there are survivors of childhood cancer. But many of these children who are growing up and becoming functioning members of society have quite a few chronic disease issues and health issues. So even though we're curing them, we can do better because they're left with a lot of devastating side effects, heart problems, lung problems, vision problems. This is fun progress that we made. Cancer does remain the leading cause of child hands. How many people know of a child who's been diagnosed with cancer? Raise your hand. Okay, many people. Keep your hands up. How many people know of a child who unfortunately has died of cancer? Okay, so still quite a few hands in the air. One child diagnosed with cancer, in my mind, is one child too many. I will tell you a secret that I don't tell everyone. When I was 15, I was actually diagnosed with a childhood cancer. So you can do the math, see what happens once you're diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, I survived. Now, I always warn my patients, one of the side effects we don't talk about is if you get through your cancer, you too may one day grow up to become a pediatric oncologist. So you have to be careful. Success is a wonderful thing. As I mentioned, we've taken the cure rate from less than 5% to 40%. But still, there's much more to be done. We can't just stop and say, okay, we're getting good at treating cancer. Because when we treat cancer, we use poison. That's how chemotherapy works. That's how we get these better. It's a high cost rates. We haven't made much progress with it. That's what I want to prevent the childhood cancer. Well, the first is, where does it come from? It turns out, when we look at our DNA in our genes, kind of usually where our genes, our DNA, right? We have over 22,000 different sets of genes. I know people in high school have 22,000 pairs of genes, but that's a different story, a different offer, different thing. But these genes control who we are. If these genes become mutated or altered, the next gene is you may have heard of the BRCA gene, BRCA1. Well, 1 in 10 adult have a mutation in this gene, these genes, that gave them their respiratory cancer. In children, though, we've learned through research done at Primary Children's Hospital and other hospitals across the country that the risk for childhood cancer genetically is as high as 1 in 3. So that means 1 in 3 kids have a genetic basis for their cancer. What does that mean in terms of how many patients are diagnosed each year? That means almost 5,000 new pediatric cancer diagnoses each year. Hold that thought as you're much underpaid, and I'll come back to it. That way I know people are still awake. Okay. How many people have this strange syndrome? That sounds about right. It's very rare, although it's more common than we imagine. But what this is a syndrome where families keep getting cancer. Mother gets cancer, brothers get cancer, there's an aunt who has to be cancer. When you have this, almost 80 to 90% chance of developing cancer. What that like seeing a room, your chance of getting cancer in their life, usually at a young age. These families walk around with a sword of cancer over their heads, saying, "Doctor, help me. What can you do about it?" Well, it used to be that there wasn't much we could do. But as you're about to see, we've there's definitely an impact that we can make. Now, this Leaf-Armani syndrome in one of them. Now, the name of the gene, though it's supposed to be like the gene I didn't pick up. It's called P53. What a silly name, it has to do with the weight of the protein. Nevertheless, P53. In the medical literature, we refer to this gene, the P53 gene, as the guardian of the genome. This guardian of the genome, this gene, its job literally is to fly around our body and make sure that we don't get aged. It's like a super spell checker. If we get a mutation in any of our genes or any of the letters in our DNA, P53 is there. When I'm trying to describe this to kids and families, what I say is a gene standing in our body, and it's underpants with a cape flying. We all have 2 copies of P53. A copy of P53 that we inherit from our mother, and 1 copy that we get from our dad. The reason we have 2 copies is one was broken, or one developed a mutation or stopped working. It's okay, we got the other one back. And that's why most of us don't have cancer. If you have, turns out you're only born with 1 working copy. You only have 1 of your guardians of the gene, 1 P53 flying around. The other one, and it's broken P53 there to help fix the cell that lets these people go on and get some kind of cancer. And the question always comes up, okay, so what are you going to do about it? How are we going to do it? And so, knowing that, I decided in Utah, in collaboration with now, this was a bit new at the time. Sometimes you have to. And we said, look, these families, these kids, they're at risk for cancer everywhere in their body. We know they're going to get it. We don't know when they're going to get it. We don't know where they're going to get it. So let's just do a whole body MRI screen from head to toe. And everyone said, Josh, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. There's no evidence that that actually works. And we said, well, yeah, that's true, but there's no evidence it doesn't work. And they said, well, but there's no evidence that it does work. And as we know in medicine, we don't have evidence. But someone has to take the leap and try. Here's a family with Leaf-Armani syndrome, a family from Utah. Everyone in red had a brain tumor. Right? Imagine they talk about it being like a family curse. There are adrenal tumors, lung tumors, breast tumors, bone tumors. So we had a 12-year-old girl. She was totally healthy, totally fine. We said, no, you have this genetic breast tumor. So we screened her, and included in that screen was a brain MRI, and we found the brain tumor. Took it out. She didn't know she had cancer. But we knew she had a genetic risk. Her cousin also completely asymptomatic, walking around, flying, everything's good. But we said, listen, you come from this Irish family, you know you have a genetic risk. In fact, the tumor was so large, it wasn't causing symptoms. It was so large that the neurosurgeon took it out, knocked on my door, after surgery, and said, Josh, you found this way to dead. Because if you had actually had symptoms, it would have been too many, it would have been paralyzed for life. And it probably would have. Now, one thing that's so important about being a pediatrician and taking care of young patients is we can just say this guy, right? We can go on and have more, right? He now has 5 kids. It's possible we didn't find now, in terms of childhood cancer care locally, that primary children's hospital, the Department of Pediatrics, we have a very hard, we're very invested in thinking about how do you make progress in these? They don't really thought about prevention before, they've only thought about treatment, but it's too late. One of the things that they don't really tell you what to do. Oh, just take that field stick and then walk out. You're very confused why. You're also very sleep deprived and so you don't really argue. But anyway, so this goes on. Every newborn child across the country does this, gets this test. Why? Well, we're looking for things that we can make an impact on, that we can prevent. PKU, phenylketonuria, which is a metabolic syndrome, so a problem with your biochemistry. If you can detect this early based on that blood spot, you can intervene and make sure that kid lives a long, healthy life. If you don't find it early, there's a lot of neurological sequelae and problems later on. So, we all said in the field of medicine, great, it's rare, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 15,000, but if we find it, we make an impact. And I told you earlier that childhood cancer occurs in 1 in 300. Now, we don't yet have all of the genes that we know that cause childhood cancer, although this is part of the research that we're doing in our lab and in our research program at Primary Children's Hospital. That's very exciting stuff. What we do know is Leigh-Brown-Maney syndrome. We can find that in 1 in 5,000, maybe 1 in 10,000. Now, what I didn't tell you was when we looked at all of the results from all of the patients that we've screened with this whole body MRI, if we're able to find cancer before you have symptoms, your 3-year overall survival is, guess what? Good. Throw out a number. 95%. Do I hear higher or do I hear lower? Higher. You're right. 100%. After 3 years, if you have cancer detected on a whole body MRI screen because you've had no symptoms, it's still small, it hasn't spread, but we know to look for it, 100% survival. Now, what if you find the cancer when it presents with symptoms? What is the survival there? We'll pick on you. Standing nearby.
Childhood?
All cancer combined.
Oh, 62.
20%. So think about that. 100% survival versus 20% survival. Why? Because you caught the cancer early before it spread. If we could figure out which children at birth are at risk, we can start screening immediately. We start screening under the year of life for early cancer. So 100% versus 20%. So if we can find a mutated p53 gene, we're going to pick up those cancers. So now we have a large effort underway. One of the great things about working and living in Utah is everyone works together. We have close collaboration with the Department of Health. We've been saving these blood spots in a freezer for many years. We have over 100,000 of these blood spots saved up, and we're going to start to go through them on a research basis at first, but hopefully change this clinically so we can start to find these cancers. Why? So we can save lives, right? Preventable childhood death. I didn't even know that we were gonna have that introduction when I came here today. All right, let's switch gears. We're gonna come back to P53, so don't be too sad, but we're gonna switch gears and we're gonna talk about elephants. Okay, now, many of you have probably heard that we use mice in the laboratory. I don't use mice personally in my lab, I like to stick to the elephants, but mice, these are the workhorse, pardon the pun, the workhorse of cancer laboratories, right? Mice are very small, they're very prone to cancer, and that's fantastic. For us, at least, maybe not for the mice. But what about elephants? What do elephants have to do with cancer? Now, to answer that question, you're going to have to indulge me for just a few more minutes. I'm going to tell you a story. And the most incredible thing about this story, some of you in the room have heard it before, is that it's true. This has not been fabricated. This is a real story. Once a year, I like to go to a medical meeting. It's probably a little bit off track, but just to improve my knowledge, just to learn, right? Not because I have to go or I'm speaking or part of the society, just because I think it might be interesting. A few years ago, I went to a meeting in Bar Harbor, Maine. Have any of you been to Bar Harbor, Maine? Great lobster. Phenomenal lobster. Don't tell my Jewish mother, but the lobster there is to die for. Okay? But I didn't go for the lobster. I went for the meeting. And the meeting was about where does cancer come from and the evolution of cancer. Well, at this meeting, there was a speaker who stood up and said, we're going to learn today, class, about something called Pedo's paradox. Now, I had never heard of Pedo or Pedo's paradox at the time. And it turns out that Sir Richard Pedo was an epidemiologist from the UK. His first name really wasn't Sir, but they like to call him that over there. Yeah, okay, at least someone says. Okay, so Sir Richard Pedo, he made the observation. He said, look, elephants are 100 times the size of people. So they have 100 times as many cells running around their body. Well, if every cell has the same chance of getting cancer, then elephants should have 100 times as much cancer as people. But the paradox Sir Richard Pedo described was that elephants don't get cancer. They almost never get cancer. It's very, very, very rare to find an elephant either in the wild or in the zoo that's ever developed cancer. And the speaker went on to say it kind of makes sense, because if you're an elephant and you develop cancer, you develop at a young age, right? If you're a 3-year-old elephant, you're still, 10 times the size of a normal person. If baby elephants were developing cancer and dropping dead of cancer, that would be a very bad thing for survival of the species, right? They'd go extinct. You don't want to go extinct if you want to survive. And so the speaker went on and said, it's probable that elephants have somehow evolved some type of protective mechanism. In order to become an elephant, they had to become cancer resistant. Otherwise, they would all be getting cancer and die, and they would be elephants. Does that make sense to you guys? No? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. All right. So this was very interesting to me. I said, well, I never really thought about elephant. I take care of kids in cancer. I never really thought about elephant cancer. But yeah, okay. I'll believe that. That's interesting. Elephants don't get cancer, and they must have somehow found a way not to get cancer. Well, then the speaker went on. This is a true story. He said, well, we looked at the DNA, the genes of the elephant, and here's what we found. Instead of 2 copies of P53, like people, elephants have, guess how many copies? 7, 4, 10, 65, no, not 65. I like your enthusiasm. It's actually, though, it's not far off. 40. Yeah, that's what I said. Wow, 40 copies. Blew my mind. Elephants have 40 copies of P53. People only have 2. They get cancer. If you have Leigh-Fraumeni syndrome and you're missing P53, you get a lot of cancer. But if you're an elephant and you have 40 copies, you don't get any cancer at all. Incredible. I went up to the speaker, and I clapped and stuff. I went up to the speaker afterwards and I said, what would you say if I told you back in my lab, Salt Lake City, University of Utah, Huntsman Cancer Institute, Primary Children's Hospital, we are taking care of and studying kids and families with Leaf-Romani syndrome. And we have a way of looking at the blood of these patients with Leaf-Romani syndrome who are missing P53 and seeing how they repair their DNA. What if, I said to the speaker, somehow, some way, I don't have any idea how, we could get some elephant blood. And we could look at that elephant blood right next to that Leaf-Romani blood, and the elephants with the extra P53 see what their blood does compared to those patients who are missing P53. What would you say to that? And he looked at me and he said the magic words in academic medicine. He said, well, if you could do that, Josh, I'd say, well, put your name on the paper. Right? So I looked at it, I said, listen, man, you had me a co-author. Let's make this happen. He said, how in the heck are you going to get elephant? I said, I have no clue. It's a pretty cool idea, huh? He said, it's a great idea. So we jumped up and down and got excited. Well, the conference ended, I flew back to Salt Lake, and 3 weeks went by. This is a true story. I forgot about the whole trip. I woke up one weekend morning, and my wife doesn't like me to tell this part of the story, we'll be honest. Woke up one weekend morning, and my wife turned to me, and his mom, we have 3 young kids, and she said, you know, Josh, house is a mess. The kids are always fighting with each other. You're always traveling, giving your science talks. I need you to just take the kids. Take the kids and leave. And you know what? I don't even care if you come back at this point. Right? Some of you probably didn't. So I said, all right, guys, let's get in the car and go. We gotta get out of here quick. So we get into the car, we pulled out, and I said, where are we gonna go? I said, let's go to the Hogle Zoo. We have a membership, we never go, we live around the corner, let's go to the zoo. So we went to the zoo, and I said, okay, kids, this was a couple of years ago. I said, oh, kids, let's go see the elephants. I heard this most amazing thing about elephants just the other week. You know that kids, elephants don't get cancer? Let's go look at them. And they said, Dad, you are so weird. I said, I know, but let's just go look at them anyways. Okay, so we go, this is a true story. So we go and we look at them. Now, how many of you have been to the Hogle Zoo? Okay, perfect, fantastic. Okay, how many of you have seen the elephant show at the Hogle Zoo? All right, so many of you. So it turns out they have these elephant shows twice a day on the weekends. We went there, it's all serendipity, right? We get there right as the elephant show started, we sit down, and at this point in the story, out walks Eric the elephant keeper. Now here's what I have to say about Eric the elephant keeper. I don't know what I was expecting an elephant keeper to look like, but Eric is it. Okay? There's a picture at the end to confirm my observations. All right? And Eric is actually a very close and good friend of mine now, so it's okay for me to talk about this. So Eric, he looks like someone that an elephant would listen to. He's big, I mean real big. He's shiny sunburned bald on top, big elephant belt buckle, big elephant boots to scoop the elephant poop. He just looks like, if I was an elephant, I would do whatever Eric told me to do. So Eric starts the show, and there I am sitting with my kids, just thinking about elephants and cancer and elephant blood. And he says, these are our African elephants at the zoo. We have 3 of them. This one is Christine Zurich, that's her baby. And this is how we've taught the elephants to walk backwards and turn around and lift their legs and even stand on their head. And then he goes on, he says, did you know, kids, the way we know these are African elephants is because they have big ears. And in the back of their ears, they have big veins to pump the blood and keep them cool in the African summer. And then Eric goes on, this is a true story, and he says, did you know, kids, once a week here at the Hogle Zoo, we draw blood from our African elephants to make sure they're healthy and their hormones are in balance. Well, that's our elephant show for today. If you have any questions, I'll be up front. We love questions at this Hogle Zoo. Have a great day. So show ends, and I do the only thing I can do, which is I ditch my kids, I cut to the front of the line, I introduce myself, true story, and I say, Eric the elephant keeper, I'm Josh the pediatric oncologist, I work right up there at Primary Children's Hospital, and I have a question for you about elephants. Oh, we love questions about elephants. I've heard them all. What's your question? So, well, Eric, I don't know if you've heard this one, but my question is, how do I get me some of that elephant blood? Really? I said, really? I explained the whole thing. And so, well, there's an ethics review board that you have to go through. We knew they had a scientific IRB at the zoo, they had an IRB at the zoo, but then we went through it. It took about 3 months to get through, but since that time, again, true story, once a week, my clinical research coordinator, instead of getting blood from our research patients, go down to the zoo, where Eric hands over the elephant blood, we rush it back to the lab, and we think we figured out why elephants don't get cancer. Now, one of the most amazing things that we found was that these elephants, they go on, when you take their cells and you zap them with radiation, not the elephants, but the cells, all the elephant cells die. Right? The human cells, only some of them die, but some of them go on, and that's why we think people can still get cancer. Whereas if you have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, so if you look at this chart, so LFS is Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Those are patient samples in red. We zap them with radiation, lots of radiation in a little dish. And those cells, they just keep growing and growing. It's as if they say, we don't care, right? They're superheroes. Remember Captain Underpants with the P-53 on his chest? He's broken. He doesn't work. So those cells can't be fixed. Those cells aren't killed and wiped out of the population. They just keep growing and growing with their mutations. That's why we think they get cancer. Then next are people, right? In green, healthy controls. And some of them die, but not all of them. And that's, like I said, why I think people go on to get cancer. Look at the elephants. They're way up on the top. If you look at an elephant cell, funny, it dies, right? It's got all of this P53 around, shooting through its body, making sure that it doesn't get any cancer. So now we're trying to figure out, how do we create a therapy? How can we actually go on to use this information? And there's a lot of other boring scientific graphs that I decided not to put in the talk. I'm happy to discuss them afterwards. But that basically explain the mechanism of how this P53 works in elephants and how it's slightly different from people and how it's doing the job that it's doing. But the story gets even better as I wind down. I do want to have some time for discussion, and of course I'll be here afterwards if people want to hear more about the elephants. As I told you, Eric became a friend. And as we were doing the research, he said to me, you know, Josh, you really need to present this at the International Elephant and Rhino Research Symposium. I said, Eric, I don't know what the International Elephant and Rhino Research Symposium is, but I usually go to medical meetings, not elephant meetings. He said, well, here's what it is. It's where all the people around the globe who take care of elephants, zoos, circuses, sanctuaries, they all come together, and it's usually held, they alternate. In 1 year, it's in some exotic international location like Thailand or somewhere else in Asia or South Africa where they have elephants. And the next year, it's in the US. But all of the elephant people are there. They would love to hear about what we're doing with kids with cancer and the elephants at the Hogle Zoo. All right. So we submitted a presentation. We got selected. We were asked to give a talk. The year that I was asked to give the talk, where was the conference? The International Elephant and Rhino Research Symposium?
Cleveland.
Pittsburgh. So I kind of lost that lottery, but that's okay. And I went and I gave the talk, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of excitement from these people who were taking care of elephants for their livelihood and never even considered that there could be implication for kids with cancer and even possibly adults with cancer. I'll tell you just as an aside, Li-Fraumeni syndrome is one way that P53 is involved in cancer, but over half of all cancer that people get, maybe even some people in this room, P53 is a gene that's involved. So you don't need to have inherited cancer to have this P53. Anyways, great conference, Pittsburgh, lovely city, got to visit the zoo, came back, a few weeks go by, I'm in my office, true story, still, phone rings, pick it up. Hello, is Dr. Schiffman there? Yes, this is Dr. Schiffman, who's this? Well, this is Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. What, this is the whole circus on the phone right now talking to me? No, Dr. Schiffman. This is Dr. Dennis Schmidt. I'm the head vet for all of Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. And you know, we have a lot of elephants in our circus, and we heard you a few weeks ago at this conference saying you have African elephants at the Hogle Zoo, but you wanted to get a hold of some fresh blood from Asian elephants. What would you say if I told you our circus is coming to town next week, and would you like, number one, would you like fresh blood from our Asian elephants for your experiments in the lab at Primary Children's? And number two, would you like free backstage passes for your entire family to go to the circus. So I said what else I could say, yes and yes. And we have become a very successful and very productive partnership with Ringling Brothers and Martindale Circus. Some of you may have heard that they're retiring their elephants from the circus, which is true, but they're not getting rid of them. They have an elephant sanctuary, we knew, in Florida, where we visited. That's where that picture was taken before the talk with Ben and the rest of my family, where they have all their Asian elephants, and they're actually working with us to build a research lab there, satellite lab, so that we can learn about elephants and cancer. So, in conclusion, we're doing great with childhood cancer, but cure comes with a cost. We're working very hard at Primary Children's Hospital and the Department of Pediatrics to improve the value and the delivery of care to children with cancer. But early prevention, early detection, I really believe that's the future. That's where we can turn all of childhood cancer into a preventable death. That's where we can make the biggest impact. And most surprising of all, elephants are going to help us get there. So thank you very much. I want to spend a few seconds acknowledging all the patients and all the people. I'm just the leader of the team, but there's a whole team behind us. But especially, as promised, there's Eric. Doesn't he just look like an elephant keeper? And there's a painting that our elephants have painted. They participated in fundraising events and research, and they donate their blood. And of course, last and certainly not least, are our 3 elephants who have helped so much with this research. Thank you for your time.
Is this unique to large mammals?
That is, yeah, that's an excellent question. So it turns out, yeah, is this unique to large animals? It turns out whales also don't get cancer. In fact, some whales live 200 years old. And so we have collaborators studying that, and we'd like to expand beyond elephants. It's probably not going to be P53. It'll probably be a different mechanism. But what we're trying to do in our lab at Primary Children's is collect all this information from nature, where nature's already figured out how not to get cancer, right? Millions and millions and millions of years to figure it out. And let's figure out how to apply that to children and families who get cancer.
If elephants have a lot of this P53, what's the process for sharing P53? In other words, let's take some P53 and just sort of flood the people who are predisposed to cancer.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The question was, if elephants have extra P53, how the heck are we going to get into people? Well, that question comes up all the time, and I used to say, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do it. But recently, we have established a collaboration with a collaborator in Israel, of all places, who has figured out how to put P53 into these little nano robots and deliver it specifically to the cancer cells, and specifically into the body where it floats around and finds wherever cancer is developing and releases it. Now that's top secret, and I'll share it with you guys. We've just started discussing how would we actually get that to work, and there's several, so we got FDA clearance and so on, and we got more work in the laboratory, but that is the goal, is to figure out how do we deliver it through these new technologies in their cancer cells. Yeah.
Did you get your name on the paper?
I am actually resubmitting the paper this afternoon. As soon as I'm finished here, I drop that off and we're going to press submit. So yes, yes, thank you. And hopefully it will get accepted. You'll hear a lot more about this. Yeah.
Through genetic mutation, could a human being ever have 4 P53s in order to eradicate, not just,
Yeah. So the question is a great question. You guys are smart. I like this. You guys have good questions. I won't tell you some of the other questions I get somewhere. But so the question was, is there any humans who ever have more copies, not just 2 or 4, and does that help prevent cancer? Well, it turns out that we are missing copies and have extra copies of all of our genes. And there's some people who have more, some people have less. Probably not 40 copies, but there may be individuals out there who come from families where they never get cancer, no matter what. And we are studying those people as well to try to answer just that question. Yes?
The fellow who had the kids, it's a success story.
Uh-huh.
If you took the tumor out, or the other doctor took the tumor out, that kind of turned on that other P53 that wasn't working.
Yeah. Yeah.
It eradicated the tumor. How does that work?
Yeah, so this is an excellent question. If you take a tumor out, so in that individual that I showed, if you take the tumor out, does it turn on the other P53? So it turns out the way that tumors come about is very interesting. So I told you we usually have 2 copies. Normally, if you don't have Leaf-Romani syndrome, 1 copy just gets randomly mutated and you're okay. But when the second one gets mutated and turned off, that's when the tumor starts growing. That's when it really becomes a tumor, when you lose both copies. People with Leaf-Romani syndrome only have 1 copy. Their second copy is broken in every cell in their body, which is why they're that much closer to developing cancer, because instead of having 2 hits or 2 mutations, 1, 2, they only need 1. In his tumor, those cells have already turned off the second P53, which allowed that cancer to grow. And once it's turned off, you can't turn it back on again, except if we're able to figure out how to add this elephant P53 or other P53 back into it. So for him, surgery was the only way that he could get out of having those P53s. Yes?
There's a small mammal, a shrew, kind of like a vole, which seems to be one of the closest genetic relatives to the elephant. Much easier, obviously, to manage in the laboratory.
Yeah.
You already looked at that.
We haven't looked at the vole. That's an interesting idea. We've looked at the hyrax, which is another animal that is related to the elephants. And hyrax get cancer, and they only have 2 copies of P53. There's actually some, I don't know if it's lunchtime conversation, but there's something called the naked mole rat. No judgment. And these naked mole rats live 30 plus years. They don't have extra copies of P53, but they have another reason why they don't get cancer. All right, so you're standing. I think that means my time here is done. Oh, what?
Henry.
Henry.
I just lost it. Okay, so children that with the P53, the P53 is missing, are there other indications that they might have missing that is they may be more susceptible to disease at a young age or allergies or anything like that?
Right now, it seems as though cancer is the major problem for children who are missing P53, who have Leaf-Romani syndrome. They're totally normal in all other aspects of their life. It's just that they have such a high risk. Thanks so much for your attention.